Hello, fellow Lolsters. Today we have Kerry Kriseman from the US, and this session has been, planning. We've been planning for this session for quite long, and all three of us we've been so excited, and we were very eager to meet virtually. And over to let's get formally introduced. Kerry Kriseman worked for St. Petersburg Times between 1988 and 1998, and as a public relations manager at Creative Clay since 2008. She graduated from the University of South Florida with a BA in Mass Communication. Kerry earned certificates in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace from the University of South Florida and adult mental health first aid from the National Council on Mental Wellbeing. She has authored Accidental First Lady, On the Front Lines and Behind the Scenes of Local Politics, taught memoir writing for Keep St. Petersburg literature, and has spoken on writing and publishing to local and national audiences. And behind the scenes, when I read that, I thought LOL is also behind the scenes of a book, publishing, writing, editing, and so on. And so welcome, Kerry, to LOL. Thanks for gracing this session. Our first question will come from Danya. Danya, your first question to Kerry.
Yeah. Hello, Kerry. My first question would be that it is different to write a personal memoir, but it's a completely different story to write a memoir which is based on political life of a person, right? So what type of extra research did you have to go through while you were writing? Because if it were a personal memoir, you would have just have to go through your own memory lane, just take up, write up, the timeline of the entire story that you want to write and write it. But when it is a political situation and you're going to explain the political life that you have shared with your partner, so there are going to be other stuff that you have to, be very sure of, which has happened through history and all that. So what type of research went into this memoir, especially this political memoir?
Well, yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you for inviting me to be here today as well. Regarding a memoir, it goes without saying that it has to be true. And I'm not trying to sound very simple here, but I think that is one thing that always has to stay at top of mind is the truth. And as an author, you decide how much you want to tell and what you want to tell. But when you write it, it must always be true and authentic. Regarding the political memoir, I began writing this as my husband was beginning his second term as mayor of St. Petersburg. So I was writing while he was still in office, and I had started writing the book as a how-to for political spouses. But the more I got into writing about that, I thought, well, who am I to tell other people how to behave and how to live their experience? But I know that I had my experiences of living life and going through what everybody goes through in life, good, the bad, the stressful, things like that. But I did it in the public eye. And what I did, because I don't know that this is unique just to me, but this is where it came from. The idea was to create a mission statement for my book. And it helped to keep me on track and not to sway, because in 22 years of political life, there's a lot of stories and there's a lot of things, but is it all relevant? Is it relevant to what I am trying to share? My first inclination when I first began writing was talking about him, because he was the one in the public eye. He was the one, and I'm like, no, this is my story, my experiences, not that he and our children and others aren't mentioned, but so there I created that mission statement to show the perspective of political spouses, and men or women, not just women. There's a couple things in the book that were unique to being a woman in terms of what I dealt with and my experience, but that helped. And as far as accuracy goes, definitely I went back and checked a lot of things, because 22 years is a long time, and a lot of times we're going through life and we're focused on the present. And, we remember experiences, but do we know every detail? Do we remember exactly who was there? So thankfully with the internet, I was able to access and make sure, yes, this was the way I remember it, or no, I need to fix, something factual.
Yes.
So definitely, be honest with yourself and what the stories you're choosing to tell, and staying true to your mission statement. Corporations and nonprofits and organizations, lots of businesses, some people even have a personal mission statement. Well, I had a mission statement for my book.
Okay. So, have you written this in your perspective? Are you the narrator? And second question, sub question, if you can, who read it first? Did your husband read it first?
Yes, it's told from my point of view. So
Okay.
yeah, the book is, and he did read it first, only because he would read chapters as I finished, because I wanted to ensure the accuracy. I wasn't looking for approval, because this was my story, and there was nothing salacious in the book. Some people felt like, oh, are you going to tell different things? Politics can be, interesting for a lot of people. And I'm like, no, this is not that kind of book. This is my experience from the political spouse perspective, which is not always told. There's a lot of books about the person who's in the elected office. But actually, I would have to say, my husband probably did, but there were some early chapters that I sent to a friend of mine who is an author of about 7 books on Florida, and he used to work for the St. Petersburg Times. That's how I met him. And so I sent one or two early chapters to him, and but once the book was finished and I was feeding the chapters, because it was about us, and I wanted to make sure, as a writer, we don't get it all right. That's why we have editors, and my husband was not my editor, but he lived that life with me, so he could say, or I had asked him, do you remember what day and who was exactly there, that kind of thing. So definitely. But I definitely had a small core of people that I shared early chapters with, just to get a sense of, are we headed in the right direction?
Yes.
I questioned, is this story worth writing? And I think a lot of writers question that. And my answer to anyone is yes. Your story is important and worth telling.
Yes. And what did he feel initial chapters when he was reading?
Honestly, he would say this if he was here, that he loved it. At one point I sent him to print it all off for some reason. I can't remember why we were printing a whole copy, because I used to email the chapters to my editor, but he went and printed it. I guess they needed a paper copy of everything. So he's at the copy store, he's has to wait for the copy. So while he's waiting, he's reading it as he's coming off, and he's like, oh my God, I love this. This is, I mean, he was sincere, because we have the kind of relationship that he'll give me something to read that he writes, and he'll ask for my critique.
Yes.
So we do have that honest relationship. He's not going to just say what I want to hear.
Yes, of course. Good. That's good.
So.
Yeah. So,
there's a question that I would like to ask, Ms. Kerry. Did the political angle to the memoir give you a fillip when you were going towards, the literary agent or a publisher, or was it holding your book back? Because there are 2 ways that it could work.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. When I was shopping my book out with queries and to literary agents, I don't believe that the fact that it was political held me back. I sent it out, and the feedback that I received when I was seeking an agent or a publisher was that it was interesting, is what they said. I mean, the feedback when I did receive feedback was consistent, which is good. But they said it was interesting. They enjoyed the story. The writing was good, which was nice to hear. But what I heard, and maybe this is a statement on the publishing industry, is that I didn't have a big enough platform, they felt, to sell books. I don't have a huge following on social media. I'm not a household name. I'm well known in my city because I'm a native and because of the politics, and just I'm active in a lot of things, not just that my husband was in politics. But outside of this, and I think that big agencies and publishers, they want to see the numbers, and they want to know that if we take this on, are we going to be able to sell it? That's the feedback that I got, which is how I wound up at a local publisher. And I'm very happy with how it ended. And I believe that it helps, smaller publishers are able to give other voices a chance to, be on the shelves. And, there's multiple pathways to publishing. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah. So, it's good to hear that you could. So how long you spent on hunting for a publisher or an agent, and how many drafts did you write?
Okay, so how long? I started writing in 2018, and the book was published in 2021. So I know that there's some people who can get up and put a book out in 3 months or something, and there's some that take 10 years. I have a job, so I was doing, I was working and, just living my life. So I wasn't writing full time. But because it's nonfiction, I could query agents without having the manuscript completed. Like a lot of the agents will want to see a complete manuscript for fiction. But for nonfiction, you could send a chapter or two, or whatever they requested, but you didn't have to send the finished product. So sometimes I would write, and then I would query, and I'd kind of, do it like that. And in terms of how many drafts, I would say the whole book didn't go through drafts as one product, but chapters did.
Yeah,
certainly there were chapters. I mean, there were some chapters that probably went through 3 drafts. I mean, when I first started writing, and every book is different. We've seen books of all different sizes, right?
Certainly.
But some of my early chapters were 5,000 words, and even going back, I looked at it. I was like, as a writer, when you go back and look at what you've read, sometimes it's like, oh wow, and that's why editors are so important. And I definitely edited it down before my editor saw it. But as a writer, I would look at it, and and then you let it sit for a week or so, and then you come back to it. Or for me, I find that I remember things or come up with new ideas when I'm taking a walk, which I do. I have 3 dogs, and I walk for exercise, so I walk a lot. And that's when I have my phone with me, so I could take my notes. If I'm thinking of something, we all have our methods, right?
Yes, we all do. We all do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So sometimes chapters would go through maybe 3 drafts or so, but the whole book, the process that I used was, the book was ready, and it was time to find an editor. So I happened to find an editor that I had worked with many years before at the St. Petersburg Times. He had edited Pulitzer Prize winning pieces for the paper, and he wasn't working. He had come out, he had retired and been teaching at a local university, but because of COVID, he stopped working because he didn't want to do Zoom classes. So he was at that age where he didn't need to work, but he was free.
And you got lucky.
Yes, he was excellent. And for me, I feel like it was great to have a local editor, because there were some things in my book that had to do with St. Petersburg history that I believe to read them, you wouldn't say this sentence is wrong, but factually, there were things that he found. And I think if I had an editor somewhere else, they wouldn't have maybe have caught that. But the way he and I work together, and I don't know what is traditional, I've only written one book, but I'd send him 2 chapters at a time.
Okay.
And he'd mark it up with a pencil, which I liked, because I don't like making the changes like through track changes. And so we worked really well together, and then he would send them back to me.
That's good.
Maybe that's old fashioned. I don't know, but
no, not at all. That's actually, I like that style of editing. Yeah.
I can have it right there and look at it. And,
yes.
But,
Kerry, I just have one like while you were answering this question, this just popped up in my head. Like there are going to be stuff which are confidential, which you cannot write about in this memoir, right? But without that context, the other chapters would not move forward. So how did you know, like, where to stop? Where was the point that you thought, okay, this above this, if I mention, it's going to be really, really wrong. It's going to be ethically, unfair for anyone, myself or the others. Like, where was that stop loss for you when you were writing this book?
So if I think what you're asking is, there's things that because of dealt with politics that I didn't want to write about. Is that what you're asking? And how did I navigate that?
Yes.
Yeah. For me, you're absolutely right, and that's where there were some things that my goal in this book was always to tell my stories, not to tell the negative aspects, not to use an American term, and maybe you've heard it. Yes. I didn't want to throw anyone under the bus. I mean, that was not my goal, and that's where, like I stated before, for me, we're a mission statement. And if I've ever felt like I was getting off on a tangent or going too far into a story, I would pull back. And I learned something from a writing coach. We have a local writing coach, but he's known nationally. His name is Roy Peter Clark, and he's written 20 books on the craft of writing. He's a scholar. He's used locally as an authoritative figure on writing. One of his statements is called, in one of his books, and I don't know that it was his statement, but he uses it and writes about it. It's called Murder Your Darlings. Murder Your Darlings. And what that means is you might be writing something, and maybe to you it conjures emotion, and good or bad, and it's a fun story, and it was fun for you, and it was or interesting to you, or it really made an impact. But does it serve the final purpose? Does it serve your mission? Does it serve the whole story as a whole? And, and sometimes you have to let go of stories, within a story. Sometimes you have to go for the greater purpose of keeping on track and keeping it moving. And
so did you, how many, did you murder your darlings? And that is one question. The other is, when he was editing, your editor, did he tell you to remove certain parts? Did he tell you to sequence it differently? And did you write your chapters chronologically, as in how they happen one after the other, or did you jumble them up? Did you give?
I think it's a combination of both. So the first part that you asked was whether my editor asked me to remove things and, move things around. There was one chapter that included, and again, it was one of those instances that made a big impression on me, because a comment that someone made to me early on when my husband was elected mayor, and that was his biggest office that he held, the most prominent, what have you, and that put us on the biggest platform. So somebody made a comment to me about his partisanship, which there's a lot of that in the United States, and implied that he was partisan. And the mayor's position is a nonpartisan, which means you're not representing one party, you are serving your city and your constituents. So, but this comment that someone who I thought was a friend and years ago, mayor's wife, made, I had that whole story, in my book. And my editor questioned, not to save anything for her, and I wasn't trying to make her look bad. I was telling my story, but he just had me, he never said take it out. He just wanted me to think about something and whether it, and so that's made him a great editor. He wasn't hacking and cutting and throw this out, throw that out.
Of course.
And he had me think about it. He's like, do you really need to tell this? And I decided ultimately that it didn't serve. I really took that whole story and made it part of one sentence, just a number of things.
Yeah, that's all it is worth. That's all it is worth, right?
And then can you tell me the second part again of your question?
I think I talked about, I asked you about the chronology.
The chronology, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how I started was, my outline was, I don't know, maybe it was rough. Some authors don't use outline, some do. Some use Post-it notes on a wall to get organized. So I had a list, I had my chapters. But as I started writing, I thought of different stories that I wanted to tell, and it became more of a chronology, where I ended up starting from the beginning and coming up to the end and weaving our life and parts of our life through that story. So it didn't start as a chronology, but it ended up being a chronology because the focus of my book changed. When I first started writing, I was writing it as a how-to for political spouses, like how to deal with XYZ, how to deal with the media, how to raise your kids in the public eye. And like I said earlier in our conversation, my advice kind of became the same as far as what I would do. But then I thought to myself, I'm very sensitive to what I say is that who am I to tell people how to live?
Yes.
I mean, you can give advice and say, well, you shouldn't post on social media, but you know what? There's another political spouse or anyone for that matter that posts 10 times a day. Everything
I know.
And is one right or wrong? You can't really.
So
and then that's how my book changed. It changed to telling the story and just how political life affected what we all go through, friendships, raising children, health issues, things like that.
So you showed instead of telling, which is good, So Dania, are you there? Do you have any questions? Okay. So so how did you manage rejections? Did you get, did they read your sample chapters and reject? Of course, when they ask for the whole manuscript, it almost means like it's a positive sign. But when they read the sample chapters, sometimes they say no, right? How did you get, and how did you handle that? Please share with us.
Well, if I heard from the agent or publisher that I was reaching out to, you don't always hear back from them. But when I did, like I said earlier, at least if someone provided comments, they were consistent, which made me feel good. That, it would be hard to hear that, well, your writing isn't great, you need to take a class or something.
I know.
I didn't hear that, which made me really happy. Unfortunately, I didn't like hearing that you don't have a big enough platform, but I understood. I understand the business. I mean, I'm still learning, and I was at that time very early learning about publishing.
Yes.
I understand that they're in the business to sell books, and but at the same time, I feel like anyone who wants to write should have a place. and have the opportunity. And that's why I think it's great that there are multiple paths to publishing. It doesn't have to find a big publisher and to get it done. But what I would do is to handle when I was rejected or didn't hear back, I would follow up if I didn't hear back. And then I would also do some more research online or look at books of, am I doing the best I can on my queries? Am I including what they want? And I looked at my writing, because as writers, we always need to improve if we can. There's always more to learn. And I would take a hard look. I didn't just take a rejection and go, I'm giving up, and looking back, I had 26 either rejections or just nobody replied. I've heard that authors will get 100 or more. So, I mean, but the way my story worked was that in the process of still trying to find a place for my book, I happened to have a conversation with this person that I told you about, the writing expert, who's local, and I know him, and he told me about our local press, which called St. Petersburg Press, which I didn't know about. So looking back, I just feel that for me, I was led through my rejections, through my continued conversations and perseverance of saying that I'm going to write this book and finish it and get it. I don't know how yet, but I found my way, and I feel like the timing worked out for me. My book published shortly before my husband was finished with politics. As you know, with being in the media and public eye, I did worry that when my book came out, would it be a distraction in some way for him? Like if the newspaper was like, what did she write, about politics, that kind of thing. But I just feel like, I think my advice, I guess, is that don't give up on a rejection. Keep pursuing. There is always a path. And if you get feedback, take it to heart and listen to what they say. They're not always right, but listen to what they say. Take a hard look at what you've done and keep working, because, we don't need 1 million Instagram followers to publish.
Of course.
And publishing companies might just be looking at the numbers, the metrics, or I also learned that certain agents might not be interested in a certain book at a certain time. It doesn't mean that 5 years from now they wouldn't have taken my book on. But I don't know. I don't know what other books are in front of them.
So who designed the book cover? And did you have other ideas or designs to consider? And the other thing I wanted to ask was, how long are your chapters? You said one was 5,000. I want to know, did you change it to make it smaller chapters, or did you have all of the chapters long? Thirdly, how many pages is your book?
Okay, well, here's my cover. That's my husband and me. This picture was taken in 2018, so we're going on 5 years now. And I always felt like this was taken by a local photographer for the St. Petersburg Times on the day that he was sworn in for his second term as mayor. And I think the book is Accidental First Lady. So I don't know. I always had in my mind that that's what I wanted for the cover. I didn't want anything like a sketch, or I didn't want just me. I think it shows that, I mean, you don't know right off that this is a politician, but it shows that, I am something, it's a public picture. And I love the photo. It was candid, and I did, of course, get permission. I know the photographer. I used to work with him. And then he covered my husband before he retired, but before the photographer retired. But of course, I got permission from him and the newspaper to use it. So I pretty much designed the cover.
You did it? You did it? Yeah, nice.
I played around with the colors because my husband's wearing yellow right here, his tie, and the wording is a light yellow in the background. But I played around with the background colors, and ultimately we came up with this. And the book is it's 170 pages, and it is there's a preface, and let's see, I know there's an epilogue, and there are 22 chapters. Okay. So, you know, the chapters are 10 to 15 pages long, mostly. There's some that are a little shorter. Okay. But the idea was to keep it flowing and keep it moving along. Yeah. You know, and there's also some pictures interspersed in the book. You know, there were obviously over 22 years, there were a lot of moments of, you've added pictures. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And nice. And that was at the advice of my editor. I hadn't thought of that, but he said, "What do you think about pictures?" And I think people enjoy the pictures. At least that's the feedback that I've gotten. So So how many reviews, or how the book is being you know, reviewed by professional reviewers as well as readers, social media readers? So tell us about that. You know, in terms of professional reviewers, I didn't go that route where I was engaging and paying for reviews. But I have reviews on Amazon. I have, you know, some on there, which is a struggle. I've gotten wonderful feedback from people. I mean, a political spouse that another spouse of a mayor in Michigan read it recently. We had met right after my book came out in 2021. For the first time, we met on a trip to Doha, and you know, we've kept in touch a little bit since. And she just messaged me 2 days ago to say she read my book, which I know she's a very busy person. But yeah, I've definitely gotten. I've been fortunate. I've gotten some nice media exposure. I've been on several television stations and other podcasts. Had some articles written about it. I've been invited twice to teach a memoir class. We have a local nonprofit called Keep St. Pete, which is our city. Keep St. Pete Lit, as in literature. And they provide, they're in the schools, they have book clubs, they provide free books, but they also have a number of classes on different subjects that I taught. You know, and you might wonder, well, she's written one memoir, what qualifies? Well, I say I am the average person, because I kind of used that when it was brought to my attention that I don't have a platform by the publishers. I was like, okay, you know, I don't. You're right, I don't. And I am an average person. Any person has to begin somewhere to build the social media or the followers, right? Yeah. And the feedback I've gotten is also that I feel like we all have stories to tell. Of course. You know, and it's how we tell them and whether we choose to tell them. Yeah. And, you know, and somebody out there wants to read your story. It's true. And about a year ago, I Googled, and what, you know, Google, who knows, but I did look at a number of sources, because I was just curious about what should an independent author expect to sell in the lifetime of their book. And I looked at a couple different sources, and I've surpassed that. So I'm happy. I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not living off of what I sell. I have my job, and, you know, but I've sold more books than just to friends and family, and I'm happy about that. And, you know, and I what I love is the opportunities, because I published my book, that have come my way, like teaching or being invited to speak at an organization.
Miss Kerry, So, Ms. Kerry, I just wanted to know a bit about how your publishing journey was. Like, did you go through the traditional publishing stage where you queried many people, or was it self-published, or did you do a combined hybrid? How was your entire publishing journey?
Like we talked about a little bit earlier, I sent queries to publishing houses and agents, and was either I didn't hear back or was rejected. So through a series of conversations and exploration in learning about hybrid publishing or local press companies, I found St. Petersburg Press, and it's a local publishing company. They publish obviously local authors, local stories, but they will publish even if you don't live here, but maybe have a local angle possibly.
Yes.
And so I went, I started having some conversations with them. Of course, you pay a little bit to get your book published.
Oh, okay.
But I felt that it was a very fair fee to get it published. I looked at it because I looked at other ones, and I wasn't willing to pay, $10,000 to $15,000 to get my book published. I mean, and I really didn't. I'm not knocking this, but I didn't want to self-publish. I didn't want to deal with the formatting and that kind of thing. So I knew I didn't want to go that route. So when I found St. Petersburg Press, we had a series of meetings and talked about them. I looked at the other books they had published that had done well, and so they were just, you meet with someone, you get a feel, you like the way they answer your questions. They don't skip around and try to avoid your question, things like that. It just seemed like a great way to go for me. And
that's good.
It has been a wonderful experience. And last year in 2022, they published 37 books.
Oh.
And I mean, so for a local press, it's, and I think that's great. And they're only a couple of years old. So I think they started, maybe 2020 or something like that. But
very fast.
The other thing, they helped get me set up on Amazon and Kindle Direct Publishing and things like that. They don't just leave you to go out there, and I could have figured it all out on my own, but it was nice to have a partner in the process to do that. And the one thing that's great is that, I published in October 2021. Okay. So that's a year and a half, let's say. I can still go back, and they're not doing anything for me. But if I have a question or I have something I want to bounce off of the, company or whatever, I can call them. They still take your call. It's, it's kind of like a family.
That's good.
And like I felt, and I could have purchased a marketing package if I wanted to, or a PR package where I hired someone to do PR for me, and I can still do that if I want. Personally, I just wanted to see what I could do on my own with the book, and I think that maybe it's about 50-50. The opportunities that have come my way have been organic, and some of them I have sought, and so I've done some of the work, and some of the work has come to me like, hi, would you like to do an interview? That kind of thing. I'll be teaching in the fall. We have a local college, Eckerd College, and they have an Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. So it's for seniors, people older. And I'm going to be teaching memoir to them. And so I'm excited about that. But did I answer that question? When is my next book due? That's what I get a lot of questions. I have some ideas, and they're two very different ideas that I'm mulling over. One is a children's book that I've written a very, very, very rough draft about. And I feel like it's a book that could engage. The idea is to engage the senses and your surroundings. It's probably for the 4 to 7 or 3 to 6 age.
Okay, that's lovely.
So I'm working on that, and I have another idea I'm thinking about. So I haven't actively. I need to sit down and really spend some more time on doing it. And I'm also trying to educate myself on writing children's books, because that's different than fewer words.
Yes.
Your words have to be important. You have to think of the imagery that goes along with that. It's a lot different. So
it's very interesting. Yes, of course. So how have you been marketing your book for the past 1.5 years? Did the publisher also help you in that?
You were breaking up when you asked that question. Would you mind repeating it?
Yes, I will ask. How you have been marketing your book for the
Okay.
past 1.5 years?
Mhm.
Did your publisher also help you in that?
Yeah, when the book first came out, the publisher sent a press release
Okay.
to whomever they send it, local media, publications. So that was, and they have it listed on their website, of course. And then but in terms of marketing, I had a personal, I still do, Instagram account, but I set up an author Instagram account. Looking back, I should have just changed the name of my personal, because now I have 2 Instagram accounts, and I really don't need, that would be a piece of advice. I don't need 2 Instagram accounts. So I'm trying to, and you can't combine them. Instagram doesn't let you do that. But I would try to market, just using, like, if I get a review, I would repurpose that review into an image that I could share. I would, I took opportunities. If I was invited to speak or invited to a book club, I took that opportunity. Then I would, obviously use photos and, snippets and things like that. I would reach out to different publications that I knew that maybe my publisher didn't send to, and reach out to people on my own. Because it's a political, or a book about political life, I've reached out to people in politics who have like a podcast, or because that's a different angle. You can also say that women's groups, even though my book is for male and female political spouses, a lot of women have gotten certain messages and things from my book. That's the feedback that I get. So I just try to share and connect as much as I can online, and I try to connect with the local author community as well. When I first published, we have a lot of authors. I mean, I guess a lot of cities do, but we do have a lot of, so it's quite a literary community that we live in. And I had a local author reach out to me right after my book published, and she said, "Congratulations." And she had come from newspaper reporting to be a full-time author. And she said, so she was kind of learning it as well, and she's been successful. And she said, "If you'd like to ever meet and talk about marketing, I'd love to share some tips." And I've found that the author community is very generous.
That's very good.
We all want each other to be successful. And
that's good.
And so in turn, I've had the opportunity to share what I know, or what I've learned. I mean, I feel like there's always more to learn, but I've had the opportunity with new authors who want to sit down and talk, and so I may be moving toward, some consulting, and, coming from a place of, you're brand new, you don't have a platform maybe, and where do you start? And the biggest advice that one more thing, the biggest advice that I would say is start marketing before your book comes out. I didn't do that. I didn't. I mean, I don't think I've done fine, but I don't. I see, for me, I was afraid because my husband was a public figure, that I didn't want anyone to know about it. But, a lot of times, for events, bookstores and such, they schedule 3 to 6 months in advance. And so you need to start marketing your book. And I know that's a hard thing to do while you might still be writing and editing, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah, that's a nice tip. So now we've come to the world of W. That's the end of the session, where we will be asking W questions. The answer need not be elaborate. Short ones will be. The whole idea is when the viewer or the listener don't have the time, they may just scroll and they get to know the gist of what we talk.
Sure.
They can know. So let's begin with when is this next book due? I mean, when can we expect that next book, children's book?
Let's set a goal. 2024.
Oh, brilliant!
I think I can get that done and publish 2024.
Oh, look forward to. So So, have you prepared, arranged for an illustrator for the book?
Not yet, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I need to start doing some research. There's so many talented folks out there, and even in our community, my first thought is to try to use some of the artists in our community. St. Pete has a wealth of talented artists, so I need to start doing my research.
So, are we in World of W News?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Should I ask the next question?
Please.
Ms. Kerry, can you tell us how our audience could get in touch with you if they have any questions or if they have any, suggestions? How can they get in touch with you through social media?
I'm on Instagram. That's the best way. I mean, I'm on several platforms, but at Kerry, Kerry .Kriseman, Kriseman .author. That's my Instagram handle. I also have a website, kerrykriseman.com, and I have a link tree which has a way to get in touch on my Instagram. You can click the link in my bio and message to me. You can subscribe to my newsletter. I will write back.
Sure.
That is on my website as well.
That's great.
So it's KerryKriseman.com.
Do you have another book in mind after this? And
yes,
if you do,
yes, we are already asked. Yes, okay. It's a children's book. Yes, it's a children's book. Yeah, she has answered.
Okay. So I just have one more question. I think after that we can ask our usual final question. How long do you usually take to conceptualize the book, even on writing it? Because that is one different thing. How long do you take to conceptualize a book, or does it happen instantly when you just think of a story and you just conceptualize it instantly?
Well, the first book I wrote, Accidental First Lady, was actually a suggestion by a friend, not the title of the book, but she suggested, after asking me a question about the last campaign my husband did, which was very contentious and vitriolic in the community. Her question was, how do you deal with this? And I gave her a true answer, not the answer I would give some stranger in the store. and she said, you should write a book. And quite honestly, I'd never thought about it. And I gave it some thought. So that's how that, it wasn't like I had this inside of me forever. And then this children's book, honestly, I was taking a walk one evening, which I do every evening. We have a lake in front of our house, and the idea just came to me. I hate to sound so vague about it, but that's true. That's how it came. And the next thing I started, the themes are observing your environment, taking in your environment, and how that can help your whole being. And it's for young children, and looking around and seeing things besides the things that are right in front of us. And it just occurred to me when I was on an evening walk.
Oh, that's good.
So
so very natural. So we can wrap, Danya.
So, Ms. Kerry, can you tell us, how you felt about the session, and also if you have any parting words for aspiring authors who are looking to write either a children's book or a memoir like you? What are your parting words for them, or like what are the suggestions that you give them?
Okay. Well, the first question was the parting words for you all. I enjoyed this. I'm glad it all came together, and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. And I loved your questions. I really think it was a wonderful conversation. And if I was listening to this as a new author or even a current author, I would be grateful to be able to hear it. I think you asked a lot of wonderful questions and in a nice conversational format. And so advice for aspiring authors and even current authors is, if you have a book inside of you and you have a story you want to tell, whether it's memoir or this children's book that I'm thinking of, my advice is to do it. And that doesn't mean just do it. You have to do your research and take care and educate yourself as much as possible, but don't be afraid that when you're in the bookstores or looking at a bestseller list that, oh, how could I ever do this? I think you should do it because, if someone told me, because I thought, will anybody care what I have to say about my experiences? And no, not everyone cares, but do you read every book that is on the shelf? No, it's impossible. But people do. Somebody will read your story, somebody will care, somebody will want to know, and whether it's intentional or not, your words and your thoughts will possibly help someone.
Yes.
These are the wonderful surprises that have come with publishing, the feedback
Yes.
that you receive.
Which is true.
I advise to do your research.
Yes.
Go to bookstores, look online to see what kind of books are in your genre that you want to write. Publishers and agents will ask for what is called comparative titles, and you need to be able to give that. And
Yes.
and you also want to just know what are other people saying. Even if a story has been written, how can you tell it differently because it's your perspective,
Yeah.
whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And so, so just do your research.
Yeah.
And while you're writing, try to learn more about the craft of writing. We can
Yes.
always improve. There's so many resources out there. Make sure you're good. You'll have an editor, but make sure you're good on grammar because that helps your story read well in the first place. So, brush up on grammar, but, as you're writing, but just try to educate yourself. If you can attend, if workshops are your thing and it looks interesting, try to
Yes.
attend.
Yeah.
But in the end, you have to write. You
Yeah.
just, you got to do the writing. You got to do the work.
Yeah.
You can spend a lot of time, doing your research and it's important, but in the end, you have to sit down and do the work of writing. And
Yes.
don't be afraid to write a terrible first draft because sometimes the hardest part is sitting down and doing it.
Yeah.
And then once you do it, you can look at it and say, okay, and then that can lead to something else. And in the end,
Yes.
it'll be something beautiful if you
That's
just trust the
yes.
process.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for those insights, and look forward to